going to demonstrate the single crochet stitch in this video, and to follow along you will need the hook and yarn of your choice. I'm using medium weight acrylic yarn and an eye or a 5.5mm hook, and you're going to need to make a chain. This is just for practice, so your chain can be as long or short as you want it to be, but typically we would make this chain as long as we want our project to be wide. So if I was making a blanket, this would be as long as I want my blanket to be wide. If I was making a scarf, it would be as long as I want the scarf to be wide, and so on. So once you have your chain, we're going to go back and start building on top of it with stitches. Now I'm going to have to skip the chain that's closest to my hook. I can't put my hook through this one, and I'll show you why. If I put my hook through this loop, the loop that's already on my hook has nothing to hold on to and it falls out. So we always skip at least one loop when we turn and go back. So I'm going to skip the chain that's closest to my hook, and I'm going to go to the second chain from hook, which is this blue one, and I'm going to put my hook through that. So you can see I now have 2 loops on my hook. The next step is to grab some more yarn. So I've hooked my working yarn, and I'm going to pull it through this loop in the middle right here, this blue loop. So I'm just going to pull the working yarn through one loop. And now I'm going to grab my working yarn again, and this time I'm going to pull it through both of these loops. So I'm just going to draw it through 2 loops like so, and that finishes the stitch. This is a single crochet stitch. And if you look, you can see it doesn't look like much yet, but as we add more stitches, it'll start to take shape. So now I need to find my next chain. This one that's all stretched out right here, that's the one that I just did. So I'm going to skip that one and go to the next one. I'm not actually skipping any chains. I just don't want to crochet in this one again. So I find my next chain, I insert my hook, I grab my working yarn, I draw the working yarn through the chain, I grab my working yarn again, and this time I draw it through 2 loops. So I'm going to do this again. I'm going to do it really slowly. So I find my next chain. This is the one I just used, so I'm going to go to this one, insert hook, grab your working yarn, draw the working yarn through 1 loop, grab the working yarn, and draw it through 2 loops. So there I have 3 stitches, and they're starting to take shape. Don't worry if your stitches don't look as neat and tidy as mine. I've been doing this a long time, and you're doing it for the first time. So it's okay if they're a little uneven or loose or wiggly or wonky. Just do your best and focus on the steps. So find the next chain, insert hook, yarn over, 1, yarn over, 2. And continue doing that all the way across the chain. Crochet once in each chain if you can, until you get to the very end. So I've crocheted all the way to the end of this chain. You can see there's my tail. So this is where I started, and I've made it all the way back. Now it's time to turn around and build on top of these stitches to make my second row. Now right now we're looking at the side of our stitches. Down here is my chain, and up here is the top of my stitches. And if I turn it like this, you can see it looks like a little letter V on top. That's the top of my stitch, and that's where I'm going to build my next layer of loops. So remember, we have to skip one when we turn around. So I have to create one to skip so I don't lose this stitch right here. When you get to the end of your row, chain once. That gives us a loop we can skip, and now we can flip the whole thing over so it's facing the other way. And now I can put my hook under this little letter V, and I can treat it the same way I did the chain. I grab my working yarn and I draw it through the top of that stitch, and then I grab my working yarn again and I draw it through both of the loops on my hook. Your stitch isn't done until you only have one loop left on your hook. So find the next stitch, it's right here, that little letter V. I put my hook under that. I grab my working yarn. I draw it through the stitch. I grab my working yarn again, and I draw it through the remaining loops on my hook. And continue doing that until you've gone all the way across. And then when you get back to the other end, you chain once, you turn around, and you do it all over again. So because I made my chain so short, it doesn't take me very long to get to the end. I'm at the end, I chain once, I flip it over, I put my hook under the top of my last stitch from the previous row, and I just keep going. And that's how you do the single crochet stitch. Don't worry if yours doesn't look as uniform or neat and tidy as mine. Like I said, I've been doing this for a long time. Focus on the steps, get lots of practice, teach your hands how to control the hook and yarn until you can do the stitch without even having to think about it. And then you'll be ready to start doing more advanced projects with this.